It is a privilege, Mr. Anthony Thomas.
You're here, that again. Thank you very much, Tony. Firstly, thank you very much to the ICPA for inviting me to come along here today. I actually think it's a great organisation. I really enjoy reading their magazines, and I like Tony's editorials, which are superb, particularly when he has a critical attack on HMRC. But for the serious business, for the UK tax system to operate effectively and efficiently, it must do so on the basis of trust, cooperation and mutual respect. Without these fundamental principles and considerable input for all businesses in managing their tax affairs in every sense, the system would simply fail and grind to a halt. It is therefore crucial that HMRC retain the respect of all levels of taxpayers. They must be trusted, they must be even-handed, and in their dealings they must be transparent. There is a widespread belief that HMRC seems to have forgotten the principles of the rule of law. Recent examples are the new accelerated payments of taxes up front in respect of tax avoidance schemes. The other is the direct recovery of debt. In respect to the accelerated payments, there is no right of appeal. Although there is provision for extended payment terms, these are minimal and will often be of little practical use. Direct recovery of debt, on the other hand, demonstrates clearly that HMRC has contempt for taxpayers and the rule of law in general. HMRC, I believe, is dysfunctional and cannot be trusted to manage DRD. How long will it be until the £5,000 limit is lowered and HMRC feels it can take all cash from all accounts? It is, of course, important that there be confidence that the law is applied equally to all sectors of society. Complex laws applied in an oppressive manner results in lower, not higher tax revenues, and the US is probably a very good example of that. The rule of law is the foundation of everything we do in tax, and in particular, three of the Lord Bingham, who was a Supreme Court Justice, the first one regretfully has now died, his principles apply. The first, the laws of the land should apply equally. Equality before the law is a cornerstone of our society. There cannot be one rule for the rich and the powerful and another for the poor. Secondly, ministers and public officers at all levels must exercise the powers conferred upon them in good faith, fairly, for the purposes for which these powers were conferred, without exceeding the limit of such powers and not unreasonably. And thirdly, questions of legal right and liability should ordinarily be resolved by the application of the law and not by the exercise of some discretion of some government official, in effect giving them quasi-legislative powers. As I say, although it's clear that equality before the law is a cornerstone of our society and that there cannot be one rule for the rich and the powerful, there is an important but related issue. Inequality in administration gives rise to unequal treatment and hence unfairness. It is this which has to a large extent been the focus of much criticism of HMRC. The supposed special relationship with big business, the Public Accounts Committee, and much of the ill-informed and ill-considered media attention. It is quite astonishing. The unthinkable has actually happened. The world is in turmoil. There are more sex pests being unearthed every week, yet tax is often topping the news agenda for the first time in living memory. The debate of how much tax an individual or company should pay in tax will rumble on for months. Companies cannot win. The trouble is, the letter of the law has been replaced by the spirit of the law. And big companies, and little ones for that, do not know what to do about it. For a business to operate well within the law and minimise their tax bill has become as unacceptable as a banking boss pocketing a bonus that was earned legally under an incentive plan agreed years ago. The Starbucks incident demonstrates that the tail is wagging the dog. What was presented as a climb down by the coffee chain has only managed to inflame. By offering to pay £20 million over 2 years to make up for a long period of rarely troubling HMRC is exactly the wrong way round. If we have not got a tax system fit for purpose, it really is for the government to change it, not for foreign companies to offer a donation. I suppose it does not help that HMRC is self-obsessive about the minutiae, as anyone who completes a self-assessment tax return will know, rather than taking a broader view. It is not an organisation that has improved that much since the creation of the merger, but it clearly thinks it has, as only this week HMRC celebrated all their good works by holding a Thanksgiving ceremony at Westminster Abbey. That was on Tuesday. I call it self-indulgent nonsense, and yet I'm yet to meet anyone who actually thinks the idea was a good one. Let us be perfectly clear though, politicians and HMRC are a major part of the problem. For almost 2 decades each year they have enacted reams of badly worded and highly complex legislation without totally inadequate parliamentary scrutiny. No one seriously believes that politicians understand the legislation they are enacting in anything other than a superficial way. They have neither the time nor the training to do so. HMRC suggests the problem and then proposes the legislation that it purports to solve. The most important lesson coming out of the Goldman Sachs saga is that it is in political hands to allow the tax offices to fulfil its mission. The seeming leniency of the deal and the coziness between HMRC and the taxpayer caused controversy. It is hard to avoid the conclusion that HMRC let political face-saving as well as merit count. This is a flaw in the way in which HMRC works, an unholy trinity of an over-complex tax code, a desire for negotiated settlements and good relationships with big business, and confidentiality that prevents public scrutiny. Running a fair and efficient tax system requires will and resource. Both have been lacking, and HMRC's political masters are to blame. Policymakers have improved the situation in recent years, and an overhaul of the tax system has closed many loopholes. It will be interesting to see if the GAR helps, and it is very early days yet on how well this will actually operate on the ground. I think it's at least a few years away before we actually see it having any impact. There are also too many consultation documents, where the period allowed for responses is too short to enable all the implications to be considered. There are too many references to soft landings and light touches when new legislation is implemented without due consideration. This is fine as far as it goes, but provides little real protection and can result in capricious decisions. Moreover, new taxpayers come down with a bump after the soft landing. HMRC officials are happy to have closer working when it suits them, and to continue to use the scarce and valuable resource of the professional bodies, including ICPA, to fill gaps in their own thinking, while at the same time ignoring sensible suggestions and recommendations. And what of the tax profession? Quite often I hear talk of our special relationship with HMRC, so it is crucial not to upset things. My own view is that this is more perceived than real, and always favours one side, and that is not ours. In the last couple of years, we seem to have slipped back into believing the existence of the special relationship, which is a myth in any event, and is often not of any real benefit to them, or more importantly, to taxpayers. Again, we really ought to return to the healthy tension, as Tony was saying earlier, that between HMRC and the tax profession that existed, as I say, it was 10, 15 years ago. There should be no special relationships, no cosy conferences, no favours, no deals and understanding, no inside tracks and private access and conversations behind closed doors. Instead, there should be straightforward dealing, openness and frankness with honest broking, and above all, a genuine willingness to work together with total transparency and integrity. You will probably have noticed that I have not used the word customer, a term that HMRC used to refer to taxpayers. Interestingly though, HMRC does not treat taxpayers as customers. No customer would put up with telephone calls that are not answered, or letters that go unanswered for months, mishandling taxpayer information. Technical errors by inadequately trained staff have contributed to a reduction in taxpayer confidence. Morale of HMRC staff continues to be low, which is probably another reason why they needed to visit Westminster Abbey for a HMRC team building exercise. And while there are many loyal and hard-working staff wanting to do a really good job, they're frustrated by constant change. No one at middle manager level seems to be in the same job for more than a short period of time. The impact is that no one takes responsibility for anything, and for anything they do at all, and secondly, a job never seems to be completed. And I think this tax agent strategy is actually a very good example of that. It's gone on for years. So what sort of a tax authority have we got today? Well, firstly, we've got a tax authority that introduces de facto secondary legislation without proper parliamentary scrutiny. Just take a look at the plethora of press releases, statements of practice and technical briefs. Secondly, it states that it wants to consult and be open, but sometimes allows inadequate time for meaningful and totally transparent discussion, and on occasions appears to have decided the outcome in advance. I think the business record checks were a very good example of that. And thirdly, it seeks more powers on the grounds of necessity without demonstrating why the existing powers are inadequate or inappropriate. An excellent example would be the direct recovery of debt and the recent consultation documents on tackling offshore tax evasion, the new criminal offence, strict liability, all very worrying and actually quite wrong. And fourthly, HMRC has significant operational difficulties. So just try making contact with a call centre or request a reply to a letter that's been outstanding for more than 6 weeks, or talk to someone with recent experience of the privatised debt collection team. HMRC is of the view that their IT systems will by some miracle make everything work smoothly. The digital agenda driven by the Cabinet Office is being pushed ahead at breakneck speed, with all the implications and fallout which will almost certainly follow. HMRC even wants to close down the well-tried and tested working together meetings. Everything is going digital, so we don't need to meet in the future. Quite extraordinary and completely bonkers. Then what about the digitally excluded? The vulnerable and the old who cannot, rather than will not, ever be IT literate? I suspect HMRC will just not care, provided that the majority of the taxpayers can use their electronic systems. It seems to me, though, that neither politicians nor HMRC have grasped the vital importance of trust in making the tax system work properly. To many people, the obsession with tax avoidance appears to have affected HMRC's objectivity. Resources have been diverted away from crucial operational activities, and this has a major impact on the way in which HMRC is viewed by the vast majority of the tax-paying population. The closure of all the tax offices is another example. Deliberate obfuscation of the important distinction between avoidance and evasion, the overtly political statements by senior civil servants, a failure to acknowledge administrative shortcomings despite overwhelming evidence to the contrary, all undermine trust. It is also crucial to have a fair balance between revenue powers and the rights of taxpayers. Without a better balance between the ever-increasing powers and protection for the citizen, then trust will simply continue to be eroded. A couple of years ago, the then Lord Chief Justice, Lord Judge, said at a dinner at the Mansion House, and he was quoting William Pitt the Younger. I thought this was very telling. And he said, "Necessity is the plea for every infringement of human freedom," and went on to add, "It is the argument of tyrants, it is the creed of slaves." And these remarks were followed on by the then Justice Secretary, Ken Clarke, who is a very prominent QC, who promised, and I'll quote this, "to defend the rule of law and civil liberties in a true society." Well, what's happened to these then, as far as HMRC are concerned? They are being trampled over by a very powerful HMRC, which is a power-seeking authority, and all done on the back of the tax avoidance debate. It's quite wrong. It is very important to continue to challenge HMRC. That challenge is not going to be easy, and it requires doing the right thing and avoiding polite and velvety conversations, always taking care not to bruise sensitivities. And my suspicion is some in the tax profession are experts at having these sorts of conversations. They're not effective, of course, at achieving change, but they seem to think it is. There should be a return to that healthy tension and avoid trying to develop the myth of the cosy relationship. So doing the right thing, I think, as I say, is not going to be easy, but I think it should include the following. Firstly, continue to be upfront about the revenue's failings and not to gloss over them in the hope of an easy relationship. Secondly, to voice concern at the highest levels that only a properly funded and resourced HMRC is capable of protecting the UK money box in a way that allows them time to treat citizens with respect. Thirdly, continue to be outspoken and critical when attempts by the tax profession to impress upon HMRC the value of slowing things down for proper consideration are simply ignored or result in HMRC speeding things up. Fourthly, there must be a recognition that the tax professional and HMRC are not always going to agree on everything. This is how it should be, as the tax officials and the tax advisors standing equally for justice and impartiality. And fifthly, it is not necessary to adopt an aggressive or confrontational approach on either side. Our professional relationship should be characterised by straightforward talking, being open and upfront, coupled with integrity. In other words, just working together honestly. Before I conclude, I would like to share a final thought. As tax professionals, we, and HMRC for that matter, need to remember that the future is long as well as short. And in haste, we may not discern small, even little tiny steps, totally unintended steps, which might long-term undermine the principle of judicial independence upon which the rule of law is based. I think I can detect HMRC being so confident in their new ways of working to run roughshod over taxpayers and their representatives. The recent HMRC's power grab is just one example. We must therefore remain vigilant against the slightest encroachment of judicial independence by HMRC and the impact it will have on taxpayers. Not just because judicial independence represents a meaningless superficiality, but because without judicial independence, the rule of law would just collapse. We must ensure, therefore, that the protection for citizens of all levels against an ever-powerful HMRC, and stand up on occasions and just say to them, no. Thank you. I'm very happy to take any questions. It's all probably quite boring stuff, really, but I think it's quite important.
Could you just expand a little bit on the word no, though?
I've been saying no to them for years. I mean, I just think in respect of the direct recovery of debt, I mean, the profession should be speaking with one voice. It shouldn't be trying to go and do things individually, because I think it splits the profession. That officials go to minister and say, we haven't got consensus, minister, the profession isn't totally in agreement, so the minister is totally guided by HMRC. Well, you never get to the right place for that. I think this direct recovery of debt is a complete infringement of people's human rights, and I really think we should say no.
Do you think do you think the human rights would have teeth then?
I think it does. Yeah. I think it will. I think if they do go ahead, and actually I think they'd be balmy to go ahead. I mean, there has been a lot of critical pushback and comments about it. I mean, when you read national newspapers with editorials saying, you know, HMRC should never be given the power to do this. I mean, we're not talking about the Sun and the Daily Mirror. We're talking about the Financial Times and the Telegraph and the Independent. Every single broadsheet newspaper has actually said no. But the trouble is, once these policy wonks get out there with the paper, it's very difficult to try and shift it. And my worry about it is the failure to have proper judicial oversight of it. I remember very clearly Lynn Homer being asked at the Public Accounts Committee not very long ago by Andrew Tyree, who's, the Treasury Select Committee, asked about this direct recovery of debt because Parliament's concerned about it. You know, the select committees are concerned. And she said it didn't merit, was her word, didn't merit independent oversight. I mean, the woman's mad. Of course it means. It's a completely crucial. I mean, it will go wrong. You know, they haven't thought it through. They think because it's done in Australia and it works all right, then why shouldn't it work over here? But they forget, though, don't they, that we sent all our convicts over to Australia. And so maybe they need it over there. Although I must admit we've had a couple back, haven't we? And they've gone to prison, so we're actually all right. But I think it's a very dangerous place to be. And that's just one example. And I think if they get that, I mean, I think they are capable of doing anything, unless somebody says no.
Can I ask, Anthony, through your work at the Low Income Tax Reform Group, how is it going with our disadvantaged taxpayers, with those with disabilities, those struggling? I mean, here in parts of Norfolk where there's virtually no internet access, etc., etc., how is this all playing out from your perspective at that level? Do we think they're literally just saying, well, tough takers, get on with it? Or
no, I don't actually think they are, Tony. I mean, to be fair to them, that there is a group in HMRC that deals specifically with these groups of people. And the people leading it genuinely want to get to the right place with it. The problem is, the people keep changing. And therefore, you don't get this consistency which you have. I mean, the closing of the tax offices, I think, is a major issue. Particularly, you know, when you get people coming into the country who can't speak the language. And, you know, to go to your local tax office and find a yellow telephone outside it, you know. When you can't speak the language, you need help. And the danger that HMRC, I don't think, have thought about, is a group of people who genuinely want to get into the tax system, who are actually not being able to get into it because there isn't anyone there to help them, and they wouldn't know what to do. That's not a good place to be either.
No.
Yeah. So I do think genuinely they do want to work with us.
Good.
Couple of quick points. One, you mentioned the Australians who got to jail. You forgot about the one who owns most of the media. Which has some impact. But you've all, the other point I was going to look at really has now completely gone out of my mind.
Don't worry, it's fine. Come back.
It's an age thing, don't worry about it.
You can say that, I didn't. But I do think that the professions, though, are in serious danger, because I think HMRC are laughing up their sleeves. And I think this is not right. These cosy relationships, believe me, they exist. And when you have a tax profession who are, they just feel that they're sort of in competition with one another, and I don't think they should be. They should actually be sitting around a table together and saying, actually, you know, it's not about the ICAW or the CIOT or the ATT or anything else. It's about getting the citizen treated properly. I mean, this Westminster Abbey service, I mean, I couldn't believe it. I mean, I thought it was a joke. And I wrote to both my institute president and the president of the ATT, and I said, you really ought not to be going to this. You know, we're not part of their team. You know, if they want to have an away day or a HMRC team building event, well, that's fine. I mean, I don't think they should be having it at Westminster Abbey. But we ought not to be party to that. I think it gives totally the wrong impression.